Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you all so very much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here. I haven't been back in Scituate in a really long time, and I'm really happy to be here. I see a lot of friends and family here tonight, and some hecklers too. And I want to thank the Society for inviting me here tonight. I've really been looking forward to this, and it's been an enormous trip down memory lane for me to put all of this together. Let me just make sure I'm doing this all the right way here. Oh yeah, I've got to go this way. Part of this was, this whole process was just unbelievable to get forward. When I sent an email to the Historical Society a year ago, I spoke with Martha Twigg and Gigi Marachi, and I asked, hey, what's the Society going to do for the 70th anniversary? Because I just turned 70. And a leprechaun said, oh, call the Etrusco Associates and see what's going on. So I did. And I didn't think for a second I'd be standing in front of you tonight, and I'm thrilled to be here, honestly. A little bit about what's going on. The first part of this presentation you're going to see this evening is going to show a little bit of history of Scituate Community Television's deep involvement with the Society in the 90s. And the second part is going to tell you about what it took for us to produce this documentary. It's really cool. The actual documentary you're going to see tells the story of the ship itself, the storm, the grounding of the ship in front of the lighthouse, the events that followed, and the wonderful legacy of the Etrusco Associates. I'll get that. You got it? Did you get it? Did Bob say everybody silence your cell phones? That's my wife. Tell her I'll be home at 9. All right, a little about yours truly. You all need a good laugh, so this is yours truly back in the 1990s. Look at the hair curling and the hair, everything else, and now look at me. I look like a Q-tip, but this isn't too bad. This isn't bad for a guy from Weymouth. As Bob said, I was the program director at Scituate TV from 1987 to 98. And this is us when we hung the sign over the North Scituate building. It's directly next to the post office. And it was the dance studio, and they just folded up last week, so there's a new tenant in the building. So we did a lot of work and a lot of community television inside of the building. This was a news program. If you look on the right, you're going to see Joe Norton. And I forgot the gentleman, Mr. Blake on the left side. This is our production truck. Every year we would go down to the, and we would shoot video Heritage Days. This was our mobile production truck. That's yours truly, the really cute guy that's right there. And in our studio every year, we have Santa Claus. The studio was 40 by 40. This was the second largest community television studio south of Boston, and the only one bigger than this was WGEH in Boston. People didn't realize how lucky we were to have something like this in our own backyard. We did a lot. This is the control room. We had 200 volunteers come through our facility, and it was a busy place. This is, now I know some of you you're going to look at this picture and say, oh, I know these people. So let me get through the presentation, and I'll call this back up, and you'll be able to do this. I think one of the Bailey brothers is in there. So anyway, we'll call this back up so you can see it. Well, volunteers set some real high benchmarks in producing some of these programs. This was Wee Pearson's program. I'm not sure if any of you remember it or not. Mr. Pearson, he won a lot of awards, and we did a lot of work. He produced over 410 television shows in this building, and it was really cool. And by the way, our own Scituate media multiple titans of fame, Joe Norton, Peter Whitfield, Nancy Murray Young, Frank Hines, Johnny Dolan, little Johnny Dolan, and guess what? Aaron Katursky, he was a host of Mr. Pearson's program in high school. And that's Aaron and myself. We were at the presidential debate. Aaron was working at that time for ABC Radio, and I drove over to see him. And that was just a blast. Wee Pearson also had the Historical Society leadership as guests on his program on a number of occasions, because you guys are the biggest historical society south of Boston. So he knew that. Plus, he also had the Cohasset people on there too. So just after I started in Scituate, Dave Ball came by the studio one day, and there's Dave and Fred, and he said, "Hey, Bobby, I want you to come over to the studio, over to the Little Red Schoolhouse. You got a few minutes to come over there?" I said, "Yeah, Dave, sure." So I got my car, and I went over there, and without telling me, Dave brought me in to meet Mrs. Lade. Oh my God. I felt like I was going to be sent to detention. And then you realize it's Mrs. Lade. And I can hear her voice as I stand here right now. I can hear her voice and her laugh. Because she was such a remarkable lady. And she, honest to God, she really implored us to get Scituate Community Television involved with this society. And we did. And it was really the mission of what we were doing. And I believe that much of our work did that while we were here. But I was also one of the very few lucky ones that's been up to the top of some very tall Scituate landmarks. I was in Lawson Tower when they were videotaping, while we were videotaping the re-shingling back in the 90s. We were there also, Peter Whitfield and I, when they repaired the bells and remounted everything. I was also there with Peter Whitfield when the Boy Scout rebuilt the, whatever you call these, the handles. Thank you for the, yeah. I was also at Scituate Lighthouse. We went inside the lighthouse, up to the top of the lighthouse, when there was no top. So we got all the way up there, we videotaped everything, sort of circled all around it. And then we also were there when the top was being rebuilt by New England Steel. And we went and saw that process and videotaped it. We had access to a lot of things, and we showed it on local cable on Channel 3 years and years ago. Now, I have a confession. This is a big wow for me. I've been inside a Minot Lighthouse. And the reason I was inside a Minot Lighthouse, we had to take the video camera, and I was with the Scituate crew, the Coast Guard crew. They dropped me off, and I had to bring all of this equipment up to go inside of the lighthouse. And we videotaped the entire inside of the lighthouse, and who knew that there was perfect bedroom furniture, all curved and built to the arc inside of the lighthouse. Wow. Drawers all worked and everything. And we filmed the whole inside of the lighthouse because Mr. Pearson did a program about the top of the lighthouse being rebuilt the same as the Scituate Lighthouse. So we recorded all of that. That's why I wanted to sort of say to all of you, I was in the right place at the right time for all of this to happen. And we got involved with a lot of other projects with the Society. For example, when the Society purchased the James House in the early 90s, much of the interior went down to bare walls. So George Bierce, one of the best townies in town, and he worked at the post office, George Bierce and I became great friends, and we installed cable wiring in every single room in the James House. And there's the Etrusco display. And then we fed the cable, all of that back to the media cabinet. And the reason we did that is so we could have separate videos we were going to make for each display. It was really cool, the idea was. The other thing that we did, we had a huge auction for the Scituate Historical Society. And this is all the equipment we had to bring over there to do it. It was just huge. Everything was analog, and it was a ton of work. And this picture is John and Sally Thomas. And we are inside the Selectman's office for this auction. And we raised $8,000 for the James House, for the reconstruction project, just from that one night of an auction. This is the involvement community television had here in town, and it was my gig. This is Joe Norton and Donna Wright here in town. And also, 20 years ago this month, Peter Whitfield videotaped your 50th anniversary and at the Barker Tavern. And I recently watched the whole hour-and-a-half long video, and it was awesome. I think it's one of the best video presentations of the Etrusco historically, outside of Mr. Gallagher's program. And I found this tape in my pile of tapes. And I believe that this is just a definitive Etrusco story. And also, I don't know if the Society has this videotape, so I brought it with me. And I also made a digital DVD copy, and I'm going to present that to the society for them to use. The other thing too is, you know, I did watch Mr. Gallagher's video on C-SPAN, and I thought this was phenomenal. It was an hour long, and he did a great job in 2017 about the Etrusco. And I was jealous about this, because his presentation was just so great. He had so many more details than we did. The irony was, we did our video 21 years earlier. We did ours in 1996, his was 2017. And it was just so well done. And if Mr. Gallagher's here, I welcome your critique. And on the top of that list of what we did is the story of how we produced this tonight, the Etrusco documentary. It tells the story of the grounding of the ship that landed next to the lighthouse in 1956 on St. Patrick's Day. Peter Whitfield, his wife Barbara, George and Carolyn Bierce, George's Jacques Dantone. These were the guys that came into me who initiated the project. George's Dantone was a film photographer for WBZ TV. And he went up in a helicopter and shot on film the grounding of the Etrusco after the event. And WBZ used to have that. Mr. Dantone had the film, and his car got stolen, and he left it at home. And it never got seen again. That's a true story. We began this documentary in the spring of 1993, when George's Dantone approached Dave Ball and the Society with his professionally made audio cassette, which you're going to hear in part of this program tonight. And Dave sent Dantone over to my office, and we all met to agree to do this project. And then we approached the leadership, and they said, okay, go ahead and do it. This is one of the poster boards you see here tonight that I put together. These poster boards are all of the materials that I've had in my office, in my house for 28 years in 2 boxes in the attic. And I took them all down when Gigi invited me and Martha, and I put these on the poster boards. And I want to make and tell you that you're going to keep these boards. I'm not taking them home. These are for the society to have. And when you have an 80th Etrusco event, I'm coming. So, you're welcome to them, please. It was a lot of fun putting this together. It really was. But here's what we had to do. You see all the stuff that's here in these posters on the poster boards. This is how we actually shot all of this material for us to do this documentary tonight. This is a video camera in the studio. And we had to point it to an easel. And we had to shoot, put something on the easel. And we focus it in, and then put all of that to videotape in order for us to produce the documentary. And we ended up having 20 videotapes, 30 minutes long. And by the time we were done, we also realized, you know what? We also need to go out and get the word out about the project. So we went to the Lowell Society, the Hanover Society. We went to all the societies in town. Chamber of Commerce we spoke at, the Rotaries we spoke at, high schools we spoke at to get kids involved. It was really cool what we did, and to try to do this the right way. And it was just the right thing to do, and we gathered a lot of materials to do this. And here we are also, Betsy Burns donated some really unique 16mm film from the 1950s, and we used this in the video too. We went to the Mariner, the Patriot Ledger. We went to the Boston Globe. We looked at film and microfiche archives. We did a lot of work to try to figure out what we needed. And then if you look on the bottom, you'll see the model that's in the society. George's Dantone himself paid for this model. He had it commissioned. And he sent it to the studio when they were done. And it was really neat with what he did. We also got a hold of the folks who displayed this down on Front Street, and we talked to them too. These are the videotapes I had to use when we put all this stuff to tape. This is 3/4-inch broadcast. The other interesting thing, we had Rudy Mitchell's Monday Men's Club breakfast. These guys would go to the Gannett Grill, have breakfast. They'd come across the street, 40 guys. And I felt bad for my bathroom afterwards. It was just unbelievable. These guys had such a wonderful time. But I'm honest to God, the Bailey brothers would be here, Aldi Mitchell, Aldi Finney. There's names in here that a lot of you may know. And these gentlemen would come in, and I recorded them, and all these tall tales, and they didn't hold back, nor did their cursory language hold back. But this is the inside of our TV studio that a lot of you may not have ever seen. They had a blast. And then one day, a gentleman mentioned to us, he said, "Hey, Bob, you need to go next door to go see Charlotte Finney at Charlotte's Hair Salon." Her dad was none other than Bill Conley of Bill's Lunchbox. How did we know that? So sure enough, we went and we interviewed Bill on the program. You're going to see his interview tonight. We also reached out to the Wheeler family. Lisa Barbosa and George Bierce were instrumental to go to Mrs. Wheeler's home, and we interviewed her for the program. And it was delightful. It was so nice. And the final process for us doing this documentary was to fit the pictures to the words. This is the inside of the studio for what we had to do this. The voice you're going to hear tonight narrating the program is George's D'Antone himself, the gentleman on the left. There's myself and George Bierce. And in the process of what we did, it took a long time to record his audio, and it was a big challenge, but we did it, and it's good. This is the music library that we had a license for. Continental Cablevision paid for that license, so I could use all the music. And we did it right. And I picked out every single track of music in there. In total, the combined effort for us to produce this documentary took us 3 years. And when we were finished, it took us 2 weeks alone for the 4 of us to edit everything together. 2 full weeks. And we needed to do this in the time frame before the 40th anniversary. And we did it. Now, if any of you want to do this today, go to TikTok. Have your kids and your grandchildren go to TikTok. So I had my daughter go to TikTok, and I had her type in the Etrusco. There's 80 hits. There's no video. There's nothing about the ship. You got a big kick out of that one. So, next, we premiered the documentary in May of 1996 at our studio. And that was really cool. This is a shot of our TV studio in North Scituate. It was huge. And there's the ship itself in the back, if you look at the slide, inside of a big plastic case, which is what it is today. And we had a full house with many of the Historical Society members, invited guests, friends, media reporters. I even think Mary Ford was actually there. And after we screened it to the Society, the membership gave us their permission and welcome approval. We asked them if we could move ahead with a bigger presentation, which we did at the Barker Tavern. And that was in conjunction with the 40th anniversary, and that was in November of 1996, November 8th, actually. And these are some photographs which are up here on the boards of those in attendance. It was a huge success, and I was very, very proud of what we did. It was a lot of work, and it was 250 people that were there. And it was just a really wonderful time. But here's a funny story. If you look at George and Carolyn Bierce, they did all of the displays for all of this. And when we got to the Barker Tavern, I want you to look at how we hung the displays. These are bifold doors. We took all the bifold doors off of the inside of George's house and Peter Whitfield's house. And there were no bifold doors because we hung all the pictures upside down. Ingenuity. And that was just a blast. You can see here also, there's Mr. D'Antone and some of the invited guests, asking a lot of questions about how this all came about. And it was really neat to be able to do what we did. It was just a real labor of love. And frankly, this did not cost the Society a single penny for us to do this documentary, not 1 cent. We did all of this out of our own pockets, and it was a really fun labor of love to be able to do this. But the other side of it is, I made sure that any expenses I incurred, like videotape, camcorder batteries, they went on my expense list for Continental Cable, which is now defunct. And when we completed the video, a good colleague of mine said, you need to send this into the New England Cable Television Awards and enter it into their documentaries. So I did, and we won. First place on the New England Cable Television Awards for special recognition. It was a really beautiful event. We were so surprised. We didn't think we'd get it. And Pete and George and I, we went down to this event at Salve Regina College. And I want to thank those guys in a different way. I contacted Peter Whitfield's family, and I reached out to speak to his daughter, Susan Flaherty, and she was just so wonderful to give me some pointers. And I also reached out to George Bierce's daughter, Julie Bierce, and spoke to her. I wanted to do my homework and make sure all my information was right for me to stand here tonight. I really did, and I'm glad that I did. Pete was awesome. He was a right arm for me. He was also Santa Claus in North Scituate on the fire truck all those years. And this is George and Carolyn for all the work that they have done. They were my right arms. There's a couple of great stories about George Bierce I'll tell later. But I've been away from Scituate now since 1998. That's a long time. But I have my own Scituate wall at my home. There's a statue of mine at Light, paintings of Scituate and mine at lighthouses from Carolyn Bierce herself. I have a colored negative print of the Etrusco that Georges Danton shot from the helicopter. I have my very worn out Maritime and Mossy Museum mug. I need a new one, please. That would be nice. Do you have an Etrusco coffee mug? That would be smart. And I have a t-shirt of the Etrusco. Who has that? In closing, I want to share a very personal story here. As I recently now had this new way of transferring all of this media that you've seen and on the boards to digital format to print and do this tonight, I thought, well, you know what, I better do a test of this. So I went in the attic of my house and I brought down a slide carousel, one of my dad's slide carousels. And oh, great, I'll take some slides and put it into this little machine and oh, great. So I did all these and I get to the 17th slide. Remember that number. I get to the 17th slide. And there's my dad. And I pull this out. And that is the slide that my father took in 1956 in the summer. I'd never seen this. And here's the second slide my father shot. I was a year old when these were shot. I had no idea these were there. And my dad never told me. It was the 17th and the 18th slide. I think that leprechaun had something to do with this. I'm proud to stand here tonight to be able to show you all of this. And now, the Etrusco is going to linger on. So I'm going to show you the documentary now. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me here. I'm happy to take questions after the event if you'd like. And let me present the documentary. Thank you.
Reminded of the many historical events which have taken place at this site in the past years. In contrast to the fury of those occasions, this day is beautiful. Warm sunshine, gentle seas, the gulls and terns ride the air currents above, and the Cedar Lighthouse is on my right, with its usual number of tourists, stands majestically at the entrance of Scituate Harbor. This is Georges Danton, your host. The date was September 1814. The time was late evening. Rebecca and Abigail Bates, daughters of the lighthouse keeper, fooled the British Navy attempting a Scituate landing by beating a drum and playing a fife, which caused the British into thinking the Americans were about to attack. They turned and fled from the entrance of Scituate Harbor. It is interesting to note that over a dozen shipwrecks took place at this identical site. Delaware in 1840, the Elizabeth in 1859, and the Elsie Bay in 1885 were but a few. Two more serious disasters were the Edward H. Morton in 1888, when 15 drowned, and the Boston pilot boat Columbia at the height of a gale in 1898, when all 5 perished. The SS Etrusco, before arriving on Cedar Point Beach, had an exciting history and made many contributions toward the success of World War II. Built in Vancouver, BC, and launched as the Fort Poplar on September the 12th, 1942. During World War II, it was a very bleak time for the Allies. The Nazi U-boats offensive had been very successful in the Atlantic, and the Allies were reeling from tremendous losses. They were losing more tonnage than they could replace. Merchant shipping was the English people's lifeline. England was desperate. To meet this grave situation, ships were constructed in both the United States and Canada. The American ships were called Liberties, and the Canadian vessels were forts. The design of both was very similar. The Fort Poplar was one of these vessels. Because of Lend-Lease, the United States owned the Fort Poplar, but she was built by the Canadians and operated by the English. She was a cargo vessel, and as such, she had 5 holds. Additional cargo was placed between deck spaces, and like all these ships, carrying capacity was impressive. Fully loaded, she carried about 9,100 tons of cargo, the equivalent of 300 railroad cars, 440 light tanks, or 2,840 jeeps. During the wartime years, she had many dangerous voyages and hazardous adventures, which took her from the heat of the tropics to the frigid cold of the north. In the summer of 1943, the Fort Poplar was in the Mediterranean Sea, carrying war materials. It was here that she would be involved in a deadly air attack that would leave her captain and 3 crewmen wounded and 1 gunner dead. The Fort Poplar left the warmth of the Mediterranean in November of 1943 and sailed the dreaded Murmansk run to North Russia. The dangers of this run were many: blinding snow, driving sleet, and ice-covered decks, as well as U-boats. Exposed skin froze to lathers, while flesh adhered to the wet face mask. Finally, she arrived off Archangel on December the 3rd, 1943. The Fort Poplar arrived home in England on the 31st of January, 1944. The year 1944 was a busy year for the Fort Poplar. She arrived in Freetown, Sierra Leone, in February 1944. It was here in March that she grounded for the first time, and with the aid of 3 tugs, she was freed. She arrived back in England in April, just in time for Operation Overlord, the largest invasion the world has ever seen. This would be the long-awaited assault to drive the Third Reich from the continent, and on the 6th of June, 1944, this operation took effect. The Fort Poplar sailed there delivering critically needed supplies, and with the end of the war, she was returned to the United States. Put into reserve fleet and then sold to the Italian government in 1948 and was christened the SS Etrusco. On March 16, 1956, the SS Etrusco, an Italian freighter, having left Emden, Germany in late February, was inbound for East Boston to load grain. Buffeted by a fierce snowstorm with winds of 75 to 100 miles an hour and visibility 0, the 441-foot freighter reached the entrance to Boston Harbor. The storm had intensified. Her master was advised to turn about and head for the leeward side of Cape Cod, as it was impossible, due to the intensity of the storm, to place a pilot aboard. The storm was in its 4th day. Its fury was lashing the New England coast. The SS Etrusco headed south. On board, tensions were high. A foot of snow had accumulated on deck as the waves came over the bow. Riding high and out of balance, she fought the fury of the sea. As they were heading south, her master noticed a slight glimpse of light on shore on his starboard side. He realized he was drifting towards land. He ordered the anchor dropped in order to secure their position and possibly ride out the storm. Unfortunately, the anchor would not hold. At this point, they realized that danger was imminent. The master ordered emergency measures to be taken and sent his first SOS. The captain ordered the engines full astern, but the violence of the sea and the fury of the storm surpassed the strength of the engine. Swiftly, he tolled the warning bell, and the ship began to buck as the engines thrashed to full astern, and then, with a crash, she struck. The welded seams yawned open wide, with a cracking, churning rip. The inch-thick plates of the steel hull were sheared in two by the boulders on the shore. As Cedar Beach took a firm grasp on the SS Etrusco. The master reported many breaks in the hull, and the vessel was listing about 7 degrees. And at 23:45, the decision was made to wait till daylight before attempting removal of personnel, as it was felt the crew would be safe. One line had been fired from the Lyle gun, but had gone over the span between the ship's mast and remained undetected by the Etrusco crew till the next morning. And at about 0600, the breeches buoy was finally rigged, and the entire crew was removed in less than 2 hours.
Sailors washed ashore in a Navy launch in Narragansett Bay. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard's conducting rescue operations by Breeches Buoy off Scituate, where an Italian freighter, the SS Etrusco, with 35 men aboard, ran aground at Cedar Point Beach.
Since the decision was made to keep the crew aboard overnight, the captain stated that the night was hellish. No lights, no heat. Their clothing soaked to the skin. They huddled in the galley drinking coffee and cognac. They prayed and thanked God that they did not go down at sea. And the people of Scituate responded in kindness by affording the crew shelter, clothing, and encouragement. This was people helping people. Nearby was a cottage owned by Mrs. Lina Russo, who offered her home to the rescue personnel and press, serving coffee and whatever she had to eat. For over 10 hours, people trampled in and out of her house. At early light of the morning, there were more than 4 inches of water on the floors of her lower-level home. And by 0600 hours, which is 6 a.m., the Coast Guard finally rigged the Breeches Buoy in less than 2 hours. All the Italian crew members were rescued. They, too, enjoyed the warmth and pleasant hospitality of Mrs. Russo's home, drinking coffee, eating donuts, remembering the frightening ordeal of the evening. Some in tears and some silent. All thank God for their safety. Scituate contractor, philanthropist, and town VIP, Alan Wheeler worked closely with salvage boss Levius Curtis, providing bulldozers, machinery, and men to float the beach freighter.
It was a wild night. It was a blizzard. And my husband was plowing snow over the sandhills. And he saw the Etrusco. Of course, he didn't know what it was. It was wild over there. So he finished his job. And he came home in the morning, and he said, "Guess what, Ann?" And I said, "Well, how would I know? I was sleeping." He said, "A large ship or a boat came in." But you couldn't see it very good, but it was coming into the harbor. He said, "Why don't you put your coat on, and I'll take you over." So I got in the car, obedient, and he took me over there. I said, "A boat? It's a ship."
started to arrive. Spectators, town officials, state and local authorities. And by midday, there were hundreds of persons who came to see the 441-foot Italian freighter, SS Etrusco, high and dry at low tide. Many speculated as to how long the SS Etrusco would be visiting. The town officials began to be concerned. Local residents, after 3 days, were apprehensive about this uninvited tourist attraction. And within a week, it became apparent something had to be done about the traffic. Residents had difficulty getting to their homes along Cedar Point, and there were those who couldn't get out of their driveways. The traffic backed up over 2 miles into town. It was time for the town fathers to take action. Traffic would blockade Jericho and Lighthouse Road, so great was the influx of people that wanted a view of the vessel and to touch it at low tide and to be on hand when and if the freighter went out. As spring approached, the pressure on the town of Scituate became tremendous, with ever-increasing number of sightseers coming to the site to view the Etrusco, and at some weekends it was estimated to be in excess of 50,000 visitors. Restaurants and stores were jammed with people, some discovering Scituate for the first time.
A local restaurant owner quickly seized the opportunity, providing food and beverages on site. The huge daily crowds pleased him, but he was terrified.
Unbelievable. I never saw anything like it in Scituate. And then when the ship come in, we went over there and set up. And the only thing is, the first few times we went, we were out of stuff within 2 or 3 minutes. I had to revamp the whole truck. Then when the ship come, I went over there and everybody see you doing a land office business. And I guess that's the way life is. Somebody decided probably I shouldn't be there because it was a mobile unit. And they were going to pull my licenses on me because, I'm a mobile unit, and they said I was stationary. And to be mobile, you have to move the thing every 7 minutes. So what I done was that when I get there, I disconnect the switch so there was no juice going to the engine. And I'd leave it in low gear. And if you hit the start, it was on the floor then. If you push the button, it would turn the motor, but the motor wouldn't start. And I just pushed the button until the bus moved approximately 7 feet, and I'd go back to work. And we were back and forth across that parking lot all night. Our potato chip and Braintree supplied us with chips. And they set their big vans down, and we'd take the whole load right up to Lighthouse Point. I had a 41 Plymouth sedan car sitting alongside of that bus, and we took the seats out of it, and we just filled that solid full to the roof inside with potato chips. Sold them out of there. To the people that were out there. I've never seen anything like it since. It's tremendous.
During the month of July and August, there was still speculation as to the fate of the Etrusco. Merritt Chaplin and the Scott engineers finally determined that it would be too costly an operation to refloat her, and therefore they were going to decide to salvage her by cutting her up.
The big turnaround for the ship was proclaimed on August 24th. On that day, the Global Shipping Company of New York announced purchase of the Etrusco after she was put up for sale by her insurance company in Trieste, Italy. Her cost, $121,211. One of the new owners, Belliveau Brewer, father of Louis Gino Brewer, who would come aboard later as the ship's electrical engineer, made this determination, and he said the Global was determined to refloat the Etrusco. The new owners of the Etrusco engaged retired Admiral Levius Curtis of California, a well-known salvage expert who raised the ships at Pearl Harbor and islands throughout the Pacific in World War II. Shortly after his arrival at Scituate, Mass., he hired Alan Wheeler and Ken Galley, local contractors to provide equipment and personnel to start the salvage operation on Cedar Point Beach. He met several times with town officials and salvage crew to map out the procedures they would take to salvage the vessel. Removing the boulders from beneath the ship and patching holes in the tank bottom. And when all this was accomplished, his next move was to place large anchors 1,000 yards to the port side of the Etrusco in 40 feet of water. The objective was to inch the ship to 90 degrees with the ship's winches. Slowly they accomplished the task. But the Etrusco, resting on gravel and clay, refused to budge. Once again he called a meeting and explained the situation, suggesting they dig a channel 40 feet wide and 70 feet to just after the bridge on the starboard side, in hopes that a nor'easter would float her into the channel and move her forward into deeper water. On 22nd November 1956, a nor'easter came up and the tide was high. Approximately at 2 p.m., she began to slip into the channel and slowly move forward into deeper water.
After the initial grounding, she was free at last. The crowd cheered. Salvage men hugged each other with joy and pride, having accomplished the impossible. The admiral was jubilant. There floated a $2 million profit to her owners. Guts, sweat, and never-ending faith in Admiral Curtis' expertise paid off, and this team beat the odds. And on Thanksgiving Day, with only a handful of spectators, in contrast to the tens of thousands that have viewed the operation from day one, the SS Etrusco gracefully slid from the channel into deep water and was free at last. 4 tugs were dispatched and triumphantly towed her to the East Boston Bethlehem Pier for her preliminary repairs. A group of friends of the Etrusco were invited to ride her into Boston. Among those aboard was the noted marine author Edward Rowe Snow. And traveling at 5 knots, we observed people along the shore waving at the ship. The Etrusco sweeps silently past minute light towards Boston skies. From many, a mist is rising to the rise. Goodbye, Etrusco, goodbye. The Etrusco, a fragment detached from the earth, will run lonely and swift. In December 1956, aboard the SS Etrusco, the ceremony had taken place in the rechristening of the SS Etrusco to the SS Scituate in honor of the town that had hosted her for 7 months. In attendance was Captain and Mrs. Vanderlyn and their sons, also Gino Brewer, who raised the colors of the Liberian flag. A Baltimore shipyard was awarded the contract to repair her prior to her going back to sea. On Christmas Day, 1956, she was told south from Boston, where she passed her old haunts along the coast in the town of Scituate, Mass. In the early afternoon, she dipped her colors in a farewell salute as people lined the shores. And after repair in Baltimore, the SS Scituate went back to sea on Easter Sunday in 1957. After 4 years of sea duty, she was renamed the Irene X. And on April the 8th, 1964, she grounded off the Gulf of Tonkin. She was refloated and badly damaged. May 10th, 1964, she arrived at the Hong Kong port. And on August the 9th, 1964, she broke her moorings in a typhoon, again damaged. Finally, in October 1964, she was sold locally for scrapping, thus ending the saga of the SS Scituate.
sad acceptance of Etrusco's demise then became a positive force for one man who refused to let the spirit of the ship die. It was Alan Wheeler who finally observed, as time passes, we'll get tired of talking about how we helped get the Etrusco off Cedar Point and back to sea. And so, the Etrusco Associates was born and dedicated to helping people.
So we used to have a dinner dance every year on March 16th. And we had it for 2 or 3 years. So Alan said, I don't know why we're continuing this. People know about the Etrusco. He said, I think we should do something to help people. And he said, I had polio when I was 4 or 5 years old. And he said, I know what you need, equipment, medical equipment. So he got up to speak. He brought the wheelchair up through the audience. And he said, I'd like to start a lending library for the people that need it. He said there was the woman that really needs it. And so he said, I would like to have you people buy the wheelchair. And I'll pay for your dinners. So that it isn't me. It's you people that will buy the wheelchairs. And we'll then start a lending library.
The London Library includes hospital beds, wheelchairs, crutches, and every aid possible to help the disabled, all at no expense.
And then we didn't know what to do with to start the association, what we do for a building. We had an auction at our place in Scituate, and we made maybe $4,000, and then we had another auction, and then we had another one on Brook Street, Costello, and we raised enough money, and then my husband went to he was in the Scituate Federal Bank, so he went to them to borrow some money. So they gave him money, and people, instead of sending flowers when you die, they send contributions.
Towards the building.
Towards the building, yeah. So we got the building all paid.
Wonderful.
And now we have volunteers to run it. The volunteers do a beautiful job.
The SEA is supported solely by membership dues and donations, and has been faithfully administered by President Jean Hugubin for over 30 years. Financial support comes from annual dues and generous memorial gifts and donations, helping to meet annual expenses. The Scituate Etrusco Associates has kept the memory of giving alive in the helping of others in need.
How do you feel about the association today, here 40 years later?
I think it's done a beautiful job. It's helped so many people. It's amazing how many people we've helped.
And so, the legacy of the Etrusco lingers on. The stately ship is seen no more on the Scituate shore. A sudden thought, some careless rhyme still floats above the wrecks of time. But seamen and landsmen, there is some sort of Cedar Point for all, and beware of it. Prepare for it in time. Thank God it is past, and you lucky men for whom, for some rare fatality, your Cedar Point was kind. Flatter not yourselves that good luck's judgment and discretion you might have floundered and gone down, had the spirit of Cedar Point said the word.
anybody have any questions they'd like to throw out, just let us. Again, there's a lot of material here, which I'm kind of glad. I really would like Mr. Gallagher and others to take a look at it. I just kind of hope we didn't do anything wrong. But this was a real effort by a lot of people, as you can see in these credits. We were so surprised and so welcomed to do this project by the society, and they reached out to a lot of other people. So it's this society that drove us to do this project and to keep working on this project for 3 years. And for the 2 full weeks it took us to edit this all together, it was worth every second. I'm really proud of this. I really am. And I'm glad the society has this. It'll be on the website moving forward so that your children and everybody else moving forward can go to the Scituate Historical website and they can see this video. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all.